Welcome, listeners, to the fourth episode of Decoding the Profiles in Power, the series powered by West Ferry Times, where we explore the untold stories and hidden layers behind some of the most influential figures of our time.
I am thrilled to join you as we dive into these extraordinary journeys, stories that are equal parts inspiring, controversial, and deeply human. Today, we're turning the spotlight on a figure who broke barriers, redefined success, and left a lasting impression on Britain's political and financial landscape.
Absolutely, Alex. This episode is about a leader who transitioned from a working-class immigrant background to the heights of the British government, a testament to ambition and grit. If you've ever doubted the power of determination, this story will surely change your mind.
But it's not just about the triumphs. We'll also unpack the challenges, controversies, and moments where the shine of success dimmed, revealing the complexities of leadership.
And of course, this podcast is proudly brought to you by West Ferry Times, where thoughtful analysis meets groundbreaking stories. Ready to get started, Alex?
More than ready. Let's peel back the layers and uncover the extraordinary life of our subject for today.
Our story begins in Rochdale, Lancashire, in 1969. Born to Pakistani immigrant parents, our subject spent his early years in a modest two-bedroom flat, living above his father's shop. His father, known as Mr. Night and Day, worked tirelessly as a bus driver, often taking double shifts to support his family of 7.
That kind of relentless work ethic was a cornerstone of his upbringing. Imagine being a young child, watching your father push through long hours to provide for the family. It's no wonder resilience became one of his defining traits.
But resilience wasn't just about surviving tough times. Growing up in a predominantly white working-class neighborhood in Bristol, he encountered racism and discrimination early on. He later recalled moments when people told him outright that someone like him couldn't succeed.
And instead of internalizing that negativity, he used it as fuel. Attending down-end school in Bristol wasn't easy, and his teachers, as he shared in interviews, didn't exactly encourage lofty ambitions. But there was something in him, a spark, a defiance, that refused to accept those limitations.
That spark led him to a deep love for economics and finance. He pursued his higher education at the University of Exeter, studying economics and politics. It was here that his political journey unofficially began.
That's right. He joined the Conservative Party during his university years, a decision that surprised many, given the party's image at the time. It wasn't the natural choice for someone from his background, but he believed in its principles of self-reliance and aspiration.
And those principles were evident even in his college years. He was known as a sharp, outspoken student who wasn't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. This mix of audacity and intellect would serve him well in the years to come.
After university, our subject didn't immediately dive into politics. Instead, he chose the financial sector, a decision that would shape his career in profound ways. His first job was at Chase Manhattan Bank in New York, where he quickly made a name for himself.
By the age of 25, he became the youngest vice president in the bank's history. Think about that. 25 years old and already breaking records in one of the most competitive industries in the world. But it wasn't just talent. It was his ability to navigate complex financial systems and build relationships that set him apart.
It's fascinating to think about the parallels between his financial career and his later political life. Both require strategic thinking, quick decision-making, and, let's be honest, a tolerance for high-pressure environments.
Exactly. After his stint at Chase Manhattan, he moved to Deutsche Bank in London. There, he climbed the ranks to become a managing director. His role involved global finance, where he oversaw investments and navigated international markets. But this wasn't just a job for him. It was a proving ground.
He's often said that his time in finance taught him how the world truly works, how economies are interconnected, how policies impact markets, and how decisions made in boardrooms trickle down to affect everyday lives.
And yet, there was always this pull toward public service. In 2009, after nearly 2 decades in the financial world, he made a bold decision. He left his lucrative career to pursue politics full-time. It wasn't just a career shift. It was a leap of faith.
A leap that paid off. By 2010, he was elected as the Member of Parliament for Bromsgrove, It's interesting to note how his financial background gave him an edge in politics. He wasn't just another politician. He was someone who had seen how policies played out in real-world scenarios.
But let's not forget the risks. Leaving behind a high-paying job in a stable industry to enter the uncertain world of politics, that takes guts. And it also shows his commitment to making a difference. Here is now.
And that's where his political journey truly begins. From this point on, it's a story of ambition, challenges, and an unyielding drive to climb the ladder of power.
After stepping into politics full-time, our subject wasted no time in making waves. In 2010, he was elected as the Member of Parliament for Bromsgrove. But the journey wasn't just about winning a seat. It was about proving his mettle in an entirely new arena.
Exactly. Let's not forget that coming from a finance background, he was stepping into uncharted territory. While many MPs have legal or political backgrounds, his expertise in economics and markets gave him a unique perspective, especially during a time when the UK was still recovering from the financial crisis.
True, and that expertise didn't go unnoticed. Within his first few years, he was appointed as Economics Secretary to the Treasury in 2012, a role that positioned him to directly influence the country's financial recovery. This was his opportunity to showcase what he had learned during his time in the private sector.
And showcase he did. His tenure was marked by initiatives to stimulate investment and support small businesses, policies that many credited with helping stabilize the economy. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Critics argued that his approaches often favored large corporations over grassroots communities.
That's the duality of leadership, isn't it? Balancing long-term economic goals with immediate public sentiment is no easy task. But his willingness to take bold steps earned him the nickname Rising Star of the Conservative Party.
And from there, the trajectory only went upward. By 2014, he was promoted to Secretary of State for Culture, Media, and Sport, a role that expanded his portfolio beyond economics into social and cultural matters. It was a chance for him to broaden his appeal and showcase his versatility.
But it also came with its share of challenges. Handling sensitive issues like press regulation and the growing influence of digital platforms required careful navigation. He managed to strike a balance, but these experiences laid the foundation for his future roles.
The year 2018 marked a pivotal moment in his career. Following a scandal that led to Amber Rudd's resignation, he was appointed Home Secretary, becoming the first British Asian to hold this position. It was a historic moment, but also one filled with immense pressure.
That's right. The Windrush scandal had rocked the Home Office, and public trust in the department was at an all-time low. His appointment was seen as a step toward rebuilding that trust. But stepping into such a role wasn't just about making headlines. It was about addressing deeply rooted issues.
And address them he did, though not without controversy. One of his first major moves was to set up a compensation scheme for Windrush victims. While this was applauded as a necessary step, the rollout was criticized for being slow and insufficient in meeting the needs of those affected.
But perhaps what defined his time as Home Secretary was his tough stance on crime and immigration. Remember his remarks about making anyone who traveled to Syria to join ISIS pay the price? That decision to revoke citizenship sparked widespread debate.
Debate is an understatement. While many praised his firm approach to national security, others questioned the legality and morality of leaving individuals stateless. It was a classic case of balancing public safety with human rights, a tightrope every Home Secretary must walk.
And let's not forget his focus on policing. He announced significant investments to recruit more police officers and tackle violent crime. While this was welcomed by law enforcement, critics argued that it didn't address the root causes of crime, such as poverty and lack of opportunities.
Still, his tenure as Home Secretary solidified his reputation as a decisive and action-oriented leader, even if it came at the cost of occasional public backlash. It set the stage for what would come next, his role as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
In February 2020, he was appointed Chancellor of the Exchequer, stepping into one of the most high-profile roles in government. Little did anyone know that within weeks, the UK would face one of the greatest economic challenges in its history, the COVID-19 pandemic.
And what a baptism by fire it was. The pandemic turned the global economy upside down, and the UK was no exception. His leadership was tested in ways no one could have predicted. The furlough scheme, business grants, and other financial measures became lifelines for millions.
But while the furlough scheme was widely praised, it wasn't without criticism. Some argued that it disproportionately benefited larger businesses, leaving smaller enterprises and freelancers struggling to stay afloat.
And then there was the challenge of balancing pandemic spending with long-term economic sustainability. His push for tighter fiscal policies once the initial shock subsided raised eyebrows, especially as sectors like hospitality and retail continued to struggle.
Let's not forget the debates around public borrowing. The UK's debt levels soared during his tenure, and while some saw this as a necessary evil, others questioned whether alternative strategies could have minimized the impact.
Through it all, he maintained a steady demeanor, often emphasizing the importance of resilience and recovery. But the strain was evident. His eventual resignation in mid-2020 signaled growing tensions within the government, particularly over economic strategy and personal differences with the Prime Minister.
No political career is without its share of controversies, and his was no exception. One of the most notable was his stance on austerity during his time in earlier roles at the Treasury.
Yes, the austerity measures he supported drew sharp criticism from opposition parties and public sector workers. Many argued that these cuts disproportionately affected the most vulnerable, while others believed they were necessary to stabilize the economy.
And then there's the issue of his rapid ascent. Some critics suggested that his close ties to the financial sector raised questions about potential conflicts of interest, especially when policies appeared to favor big business.
His tough stance on immigration also sparked controversy, with some accusing him of abandoning his roots. As the son of immigrants, his policies on stricter immigration controls were seen by some as contradictory.
At the same time, his supporters argued that his decisions were pragmatic and focused on the greater good, even if they weren't always popular.
Assessing his legacy is no easy task. On one hand, he broke barriers, becoming the first British Asian to hold several high-ranking positions in government. His story is undeniably inspiring for many.
On the other hand, his policies and decisions have left a mixed impression. While some view him as a trailblazer who brought economic expertise to politics, others see him as a divisive figure whose tough choices often alienated parts of the population.
Public perception of him has evolved over time. Initially hailed as a symbol of diversity and progress, his later years in government were marked by increased scrutiny and criticism.
But whether you agree with his policies or not, there's no denying his impact on British politics and society. He's a figure who challenged norms, took risks, and left an indelible mark.
And that brings us to the end of today's journey, a story of ambition, resilience, and the complexities of leadership.
His life reminds us that the path to power is never straightforward. It's filled with victories, setbacks, and moments that define not just the individual, but the society they aim to lead.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us next time as we dive deeper into the stories that shaped our world. Until then, stay curious and take care.
Absolutely. And don't forget to stay tuned with West Ferry Times. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel and share it with your friends and family. Let's keep the conversation going.